Hey everybody, John Raridan here for Nintendo World Report TV, and I just wanted to kind of give some concluding thoughts on E3 for this year. Just sort of walk through how I felt about it, how I think Nintendo did, and just kind of the show in general. I think a lot of Nintendo fans are coming out of this E3 a little disappointed, and I think there's a couple contributing factors to that. On the one hand, I think there's an argument for it being a lackluster showing, to be sure. This was also an E3 that had a remarkable number of rumors and leaks going into it, and I think that the pervasiveness of that stuff and the willingness that a lot of us, including myself, have to accept that stuff, it causes this unrealistic expectation of what these events are actually going to be. You hear all these things, and it's easy to get in your head that, like, yeah, these are all things that are going to happen, right? And in reality, like, what we found with leaks, even when you have something from a source that you believe is reputable, that you believe is someone who may have told you some things in the past, and then, hey, they want it to be true. 90% of the time, the leaks that you hear are not accurate. Or misinformed or whatever, because ultimately it's all this long game of telephone, you know, when that stuff does happen. And so stuff gets broken up and made inaccurate as it passes along through multiple sources. That's why NWR avoids breaking those things, breaking news, leaks, because we don't want to present that stuff as fact. Even like the Star Fox Grand Prix stuff, which I talked about, we made the conscious decision not to break that story and let someone else do it, because we were not going to present it as a thing that we had learned that was true, because we didn't know. And we still don't know. That game could still be real. I hope it's real. And just not at E3 this year. But yeah, we don't present it as fact because we don't know. And that's something that's very important to us. That's why, you know, when we did cover it, you know, we put rumor everywhere. When that video that I did starts, it has a thing at the bottom of the screen that says this video is based on a rumor that is not confirmed. This isn't to say, like, you know, look at how great we are, but it's to comment on the pervasiveness of that stuff. There were so many of them going into E3, and some of them were absolutely ridiculous, and it was easy to spot what wasn't real. But I mean, right up until the day, you know, we're hearing things that some of it sounds like it could be true, some of it sounds like it might not. But people take that stuff as reality. And then you go into E3 expecting to see all of those things, and then you don't, and you see E3 as disappointing, even when there are other things at E3 we didn't know were going to be there, that were a total surprise. And so it skews your perception of how that event actually went. I don't think this E3 was, like, if you went into this E3 with none of those rumors floating around your head, I think this E3 would probably be pretty good. There was some cool stuff in there. Of course, as always, it depends on what particular niche of fandom you're in. So for me, as someone who's a very casual Pokemon fan and is a pretty casual Smash Bros fan as well, you know, this E3 with a big focus on those things, I looked at it and said, those things look cool. I'd like to try them out, but it's not for me, and that's okay. But I want to look at kind of what Nintendo did this year, what is actually good, what's kind of neutral, and what the actual problems could be. Like there are definitely issues to be had with how Nintendo is handling this year so far. I'm not going to argue that with you. But there are also things that are much better than they're getting credit for. So real quick, let's run through some of the good things from this conference. You know what? No, let's start with the bad and work our way up to good, because then this will feel like a more optimistic video in the end, I think. It's how we should do that. The undisputable downside of this. While we did get a trailer for Fire Emblem, it looks cool. I like the totally 3D, the kind of like squad-based stuff of like formations that you have, like, each unit has like an army behind them. It's not just that unit. There's some cool stuff going on there. Clearly, obviously, we've only seen a little bit of it, but there is definitely something there that I think I'm interested in. As once again, kind of a casual fan of the series, that game looks cool to me. The downside is that both Fire Emblem and Yoshi have both been pushed officially into 2019. Fire Emblem, I don't think that's... People are kind of panicking over Fire Emblem being pushed. I don't find that too surprising. This is the first time we're seeing it. All we knew is that they had announced that there would be a Fire Emblem game. Kind of like a Metroid Prime thing where it's, you know, this is a thing that we're going to do. And I didn't read any of that as like a really firm release date, just kind of like we're targeting around this area. And so if it slips into the next year, you know, fine. That doesn't bother me. Yoshi always surprises me how long it takes to make a Yoshi game. Because it's the same thing, like Woolly World was announced in the very, very early days of the Wii U era with like a couple screenshots. And then it took, I mean, that was one of the last Wii U games to come out. And so Yoshi is a game that surprisingly has a very long development cycle. Not sure why, but it does. It's just the way of the world, I guess. And I'd always assumed, like on the Wii U, I figured, you know, okay, with that system, it was selling so poorly, they just needed games to announce, you know, to make it look like the library was full, and so they were announcing stuff way too early. And maybe that is the case with this Yoshi game, or maybe it hit some developmental snag. Maybe people that were working on that game are being pulled to work on other things. Who knows? But yeah, Yoshi being delayed is a disappointment, but, you know, these are not monumental, horrible things. Fire Emblem especially did not have a very firm release date, and Yoshi didn't have a firm release date either. It's just surprising with how much of it seems like we've seen. It's surprising that it's still so far out, you know? And then I think the concern that a lot of people have with this Direct is Nintendo's second half of this year is looking a little sparse. There's some months in there where, or at least 1 month, where like their major release is DLC, like the Xenoblade DLC, which looks amazing and looks like a very full-featured experience, don't get me wrong. But their major release is DLC. And I think a lot of people are looking at that release calendar for the second half of the year and feel like it's a little bit sparse. But I will say, I don't think we're done hearing from Nintendo yet. And that's less of a rumor and more just an observation of past habits for them. I think that later in the summer, maybe August or so, maybe even July, we'll see some sort of either Direct or just news dump. We already know there was an interview with Panic Button where they stated that they were working on they were talking about their Switch ports, and they said they were working on another major port. They expected it to be announced in the next month. So there could be a Direct as early as July, if that does indeed happen. Then it's important to remember Doom and Wolfenstein 2 were announced way later in the year, and then Doom came out pretty quickly after that announcement. So there could be more stuff. There's still hope for Star Fox Grand Prix is what I'm ultimately getting at here. So yes, while at the moment the release calendar looks a little sparse, I don't think we're done seeing announcements for 2018 yet. I don't think this is our entire 2018 year. Especially since the Nintendo Direct was focused very exclusively on Nintendo properties, first-party games. There were a few higher-profile third-party things in there, but I think there might be more yet to come. And so I wouldn't totally write off the schedule as being written just yet. Nintendo has had this habit, they did it in January even, where they sort of announce things, you know, maybe a quarter at a time. They don't give you their whole release calendar. They've been announcing stuff much more close to release. I don't know if this is just to cut down on leaks, or they just have enough games coming out finally that they don't have to reach way out into the distance just to make it seem like something is coming out. And more kind of neutral news, I guess, you have, like, speaking of third parties, one thing that did sort of disappoint me, but it's not bad news, it's just not like, yay, it's kind of like, okay. So Bethesda's putting their mobile games on Switch, which is to be expected. I think we'll see a lot of that. The Switch is in that weird spot where it's sort of both it's a handheld and a home console. And so you're going to get games that are more traditionally handheld, and it feels weird to have those ported to a home console. But then again, I guess both Fallout Shelter and Elder Scrolls Legends, the two games that were announced for Switch, are also on Xbox One and PS4. So it's not that the Switch is really being treated differently, I suppose. And arguably the Switch is much more fit to those experience than either of those other two consoles are. So like I said, it's not bad news. It's just, you know, when you look at Bethesda's library and you say, which of these games do you want on Switch? I don't think anybody was like, ooh, Elder Scrolls Legends. You know, I think, you know, we're looking at Doom 2. What's the subtitle? I don't remember, but it'll pop up on the screen. The new Doom game. The new Wolfenstein, Youngblood. You know, we're looking at those games and we're saying, well, can we have those? I will say, I think what will define whether or not we get those games is what engine they are ultimately running in. The reason that we got, so they ported Doom, right? And we got Wolfenstein as well, or we're getting Wolfenstein as well. And one of the major reasons for that is that Doom and Wolfenstein 2 run in the same engine. So if you get one to work, it's then easier to get the other one to work. Makes sense. So I think a lot of whether or not these upcoming games also wind up on Switch is if they are in that same engine, or at least an iteration on that engine, that cuts out a lot of the time and money that Bethesda would have had to spend on it. We did have comments from Reggie saying that he expects many more date party for ports to Switch in the future, as developers kind of start to catch up their engines on Switch. And I do think that's something we could see. It was important to note that Bethesda, it's not that Bethesda said that the new Wolfenstein and the new Doom would not come to Switch. They didn't announce systems. They just said these are games that we're making. So nothing has been confirmed one way or the other yet. We'll just have to wait and see there. So like I said, not bad news by any means, just not necessarily the strong show of support that maybe Nintendo fans kind of started to expect from Bethesda. Bethesda has been remarkably and very surprisingly supportive of the Switch thus far. And obviously it's not that they're not supporting it now, but Nintendo fans may have expected a bit more out of that company. And so I think that's where some of that kind of surprise is coming from. All right, let's talk about some good stuff, because we want to let's end this on a cheery note. The announced DLC for Nintendo properties so far has all been very, very good or good looking. The Octo expansion seems awesome. Some of the guys on staff are already playing it and really enjoying it. The Mario and Rabbids DLC is like half the size of the original game, so that's a huge DLC. And as you know, if you've played Mario and Rabbids, it's not like that stuff was cut out from the game. Like that is a full game, and this just sort of feels like its own like half game tacked onto the side of it. So that's awesome DLC. And once again, a cool showing of support from a third party, Ubisoft, who we'll come back to in a moment. And then of course the Xenoblade DLC, which looks fantastic, almost like its own game. It's like a totally separate story, and I'm so excited to dig back into that game. And so that's great. I mean, it's DLC and not brand new games. This isn't like the cheap money-grabbing DLC that we're used to seeing. This is very substantial DLC. This is, you know, the kind of DLC that almost could stand alone as a sequel, but is being released as DLC. Another thing that I think is being wildly overlooked is the announcement of the game Daemon X Machina, which looks awesome. It's a mech combat game with mech designs from the guy that did Macross, or Robotech, as we might know it a little better here in America. That game looks really cool. It was at the very beginning of the Direct, and so I think a lot of people just kind of forgot about it, but it looks awesome. And that's, I feel like, I mean, it's not, I don't have that much to say about it, but I'm just surprised that, like, that game isn't getting a little bit more hype. And I think it was at the beginning of the Direct and got just taken away from by other stuff. But the game looks cool, right? Mech games are good. I like mech games. When they played it on Treehouse, it looks pretty good. I think it's probably somewhat, it has a ways to go, I think, technically yet. But it says something that it wasn't playable on the show floor. I think it even crashed for them on Treehouse Live. But the promise of that game looks like something really interesting, and I'm really into it. And actually, speaking of Robotech, it reminds me of Robotech Battlecry, which released on like the GameCube and PS2, I think. It might have been on the original Xbox too. I don't remember, but for sure the GameCube. That's what I played it on, was the GameCube. Another just cool, like, very anime mech game that was awesome. So check that game out. And we shouldn't ignore, even if you're not a Smash Bros. Fan, Smash Bros. Is a big deal, alright? Like, it doesn't matter if you don't like it or not. It will do very, very, very well for Nintendo. And the way they're handling it, I think, is good. Alright? Like, I mean, the idea of doing a Smash Bros. With everyone in it, sorry, Waluigi fans, I don't care. But the idea of doing this Smash Bros. Game with everyone and kind of making it this ultimate Super Smash Bros. Is, I feel like it's a good way to just kind of conclude that series. If I were them, or if I were Sakurai at least, I'd be done with the series. And I would not be surprised if this is Sakurai's last Smash Bros. It could be that the series goes on without him. Maybe you have Namco Bandai continue to produce these games. But at least for Sakurai, I almost hope this is his last Smash Bros. Because Sakurai is such an incredible game designer, and I want him to be free to work on other stuff. I feel like Smash Bros., great as the game as it may be, is such a waste of his potential. I mean, the other stuff that he's done, look at Kid Icarus Uprising. I want more from that guy, alright? Like, that game is awesome. I don't care if you have trouble with the controls, that game is awesome. And I want more of that kind of stuff from Sakurai. So I hope that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is Sakurai's last Super Smash Bros. And if it is, I think this is a great way to end that era of him making these games. But then finally, the thing that I have to end on, the thing you knew I would end on because of who I am, Starlink. I think Starlink might be my game of show for E3 2018. Starlink is an open-world space exploration game. It's definitely got some No Man's Sky influences, and whether or not you liked that game, I don't think you can argue how important it was for gaming technology and game design. And Starlink seems to build off of that concept, which is exactly what I was hoping for when No Man's Sky first came out. Only half of my excitement for No Man's Sky was actually the game itself. So much of it was, what will other developers do with this benchmark in game design? Right? Like, once it's kind of like a Mario 64 thing, where once somebody has shown everyone how to do a 3D platformer, what can other people do with that idea to improve on it? You know? And I think No Man's Sky is very much that. What can other people do to improve on it? And so I'm super excited for Starlink. And of course, the thing I'm most excited about is it was announced that Fox McCloud, along with his Arwing, would be a playable character and ship, and they're playable for the whole game. You can just play through this game as Fox McCloud. And when you buy it physically, you get an Arwing. I would have just bought the Arwing. Like, you don't even have to put a game in that box. That sounds like a great thing. And also, because I had to find a way to rant on this somewhere, I was going to make an entire video on this. Maybe I still will. But I'll say it right now. The G diffusers, the blue things on the side of the Arwing. So most of that Arwing in Starlink, you can fast forward to this part if this part is an issue, but most of that Arwing is, the texture work is from Star Fox Zero, right? Like, that's clearly the thing they're working from. Except for the G diffusers are from Star Fox Assault. You can tell by the diamond pattern on the side of them. And also, in the toy, they articulate. How can you not be excited for this game? It has articulating G diffusers. At least I think those are the G diffusers. I might be referring to the wrong part of the ship. But hopefully there's no one in the comments who knows better than me and will correct me. I'm pretty sure, I think those are the G diffusers. I feel like it's canon that those are the G diffusers. I'm not sure though, but I'm gonna keep saying they are. Anyway, they articulate in the toy, and that is awesome. And I feel like that's probably the reason they went with the Star Fox Assault ones, is because those are the only canon G diffusers that do that little, like, when they accelerate. So cool. So cool. But yeah, that game looks awesome. The ground stuff actually reminds me of Xscape or X, either one, which were, the original X was a Game Boy game, Tank Sim, and then Xscape was a sequel to it that was on DSiWare, actually made by Q Games, which is kind of the, like, continuation of some of the guys from Argonaut, who made the original Star Fox, and so it has some of those vibes in it, which is why I got into them. But yeah, like, the stuff in Starlink where you're on the planet, kind of more acting as almost a land vehicle, really reminds me of the ground combat from Xscape. And even in that game, you could actually take off and fly. In Xscape, there was actually a surprising amount of openness. You could, like, go to other planets. There's a lot of similarities between those two games. This almost feels like it could be like a sequel to that game, which I'm totally okay with. That being said, Q Games, Dylan Cuthbert, make another X game, because I would play it. Make it on Switch, please. Anyway, those are my thoughts on E3. I'm trying to come at it in a positive light. Obviously, there are things to be improved on, but I think this E3 is probably better than people are giving it credit for. And there are definitely things in it that I'm very excited for. I mean, Starlink comes out in October. That's very soon. And that's awesome. That is a game that's like I said, probably my most anticipated game of the year right now. Unless suddenly out of nowhere another Star Fox game comes out, or like Metroid Prime 4 is like Nintendo does a direct and like Metroid Prime 4 is available right now. Like unless that happens, which it won't, I think Starlink is my most anticipated game, which is weird. I've never watched E3 and had my most anticipated game come from Ubisoft's press conference. Ubisoft's press conference is usually the conference that I watch to laugh at because there's so many dance numbers. But they did a great job this year, and I gotta hand it to them. In fact, I think Microsoft did a good job too. This was one of their better E3s. I will say Sony, this was one of their weirder E3s. It's not that the games they presented were bad, it's just that they were presented so poorly. I don't know. Maybe you have a different opinion. A lot of it probably depends on which system you're a fan of. But for me, overall, was this a bad E3? No. Was there things that I wish was there? Sure. But they're just gonna show up later. I mean, it's not that those games, like Metroid Prime 4, if it didn't show up at E3, that's because it's not ready or they're saving it for something else, and that's okay. And that's the thing about Nintendo, is they kind of do mini E3s throughout the entire year. Like, their E3 Direct is arguably not really any bigger a deal than most of their other Directs. Like, they kind of just do this on a regular basis. And so this expectation we have that their E3 Direct will be this massive thing that has every game ever in it isn't really realistic to how they handle this stuff anymore. They do multiple Directs a year, and they split it all pretty evenly throughout the year. That's kind of their strategy. And so I don't think it's fair to expect all that much from E3 for Nintendo. Sure, they'll save a few big announcements for it, Smash Bros, but I don't think we should go into E3 with Nintendo expecting this, as long as they're still doing Nintendo Directs, and I think that's okay. I think I would rather have them give me information throughout the entire year, keep me excited for gaming throughout the entire year, rather than saving it all for one point. I think I like this better. But maybe you don't. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this E3, what you're most hyped for. Let's try to keep it positive. There's too much negativity on the internet, so let's try to keep it positive in the comments. Tell me what you're excited for. Tell me what your favorite part of E3 was. And if you're excited to have the Ice Climbers back in Smash. Justin Brube is very excited. You know what else happened at E3? The Donkey... Okay, so they had Don James come on, as in, like, vintage Nintendo Don James from the arcade days. This is a dude that worked in warehouses converting Space Firebird to Donkey Kong. Like, this dude has been with Nintendo for a while. He came on to Nintendo Treehouse on the last day of the show and talked about Donkey Kong and Sky Skipper. And it was awesome. It was probably my favorite. That might have been one of my favorite. That's probably my favorite part of Treehouse. Was him coming on. It was just so out of nowhere. Like, it took me a second to register. I'm like, oh, that's Don James. Like, that's awesome. And yeah, that's all I got. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe so you can see more. Hit that bell so you don't miss when we post stuff. But you might still miss stuff because, hey, YouTube doesn't give a flying. Check out NintendoWorldReport.com for a whole lot more. And if you really like what we're doing here, if you want to support this channel and the site, you can check us out at patreon.com/NWR. And of course, there's a link to our Discord in the description. We hang out there, we do giveaways, it's a great time. Join it, chat with us, it's fun. Oh, and Fortnite! Fortnite came out too, that was kind of a sneaky thing. I mean, we all knew it was happening, but yeah, I've been playing a lot of Fortnite, it's fun. Sony, you need to get on the crossplay bandwagon with everybody else, please. Alright, that's all I got. Bye.